Hello, it's Miss C again. We are going to dive straight back in today with our third act of Macbeth, and I'm excited today because I'm going to try some more exciting colours on my eyes. It could be an absolute disaster. In fact, it probably will be, but who cares, eh? We're just here to listen to a story about Macbeth. Why else would we be here? So yeah, we're going to get started, and we are hopefully going to get through Act 3 today. All right, so we left off. Where did we leave off? We left off at the end of Act 2 with obviously Duncan dead, and with the lords and the noblemen and Banquo and Macduff and everybody sort of off to Scone to crown Macbeth and Lady Macbeth as King and Queen. So we know that Macduff is quite suspicious. Now, as we go into Act 3, Scene 1, oh, colours. Let's go pink today. As we go into Act 3, Scene 1, we discover that Banquo is also quite suspicious. Now, if you remember, we did think this earlier on briefly when Banquo seemed a little bit shifty around Macbeth. Okay, let's start with that. So if you remember, Banquo was quite shifty and strange around Macbeth when Macbeth wanted to talk to him shortly before he murdered the king. He sort of wanted to talk to him. Banquo was a bit like, well, yes, but as long as I keep my allegiance clear, you know, my loyalty to the king is kept clear and all of that. So we know that potentially Banquo's had some thoughts. This is our confirmation of that, because Act 3, Scene 1 opens with Banquo having a soliloquy, and he's sort of talking to Macbeth, but also not, because Macbeth's not actually there, but he's sort of talking to him, saying, thou has it all now, you know, you're king, you've got everything that the witches prophesied. But he says, but I fear thou playest most foully for it. Meaning, I fear foul play. I feel like actually the way you got this stuff was not through honest means. I'm worried that, but essentially he's saying, I think you killed the king. And he talks a little bit about that, but then is sort of cut off by the arrival of the king and queen, Macbeth. All right, so they've arrived. And he obviously sort of says, but hush now, okay? So he is quiet, and Lady Macbeth and Macbeth come in, and very quickly we see that Macbeth has sort of really risen to the idea of being king, because now it's all about, you know, sort of he uses the royal we, and he's speaking sort of quite grandly, and he is talking about this feast that he's going to have at their castle that night. And there's a very, very sneaky little bit here where, what colour now? There's a very sneaky bit here where Macbeth essentially, we find out very quickly after this that Macbeth wants to have Banquo murdered, okay? And we learn this because we see him talk to the murderers about it very shortly. But the sneaky bit and the horrible bit is the fact that obviously Banquo doesn't know that. We don't know it yet. So in this conversation, it seems almost casual at the time until you look back on it. And when you look back on it, you hear the way that Macbeth's talking to him, because he says things like, oh, so, you know, you're going to go riding today? And then Banquo's like, yeah, I am, and they carry on talking. And then he sort of goes, oh, is it far that you ride today? And again, he's kind of like, yeah, I'm just going here. And a little bit along in the conversation, he sort of says, oh, is Fleance going to be riding with you? So he sort of very casually asks all these questions that result in him knowing exactly where Banquo's going to be, and that he's going to be with his son. Now, if you remember, the witches said to Banquo, you won't be king, but your children will be. So it could be that obviously Macbeth's a little bit worried about that, and we learn that in a minute when we move on to when Macbeth starts speaking to himself shortly after this. So he says to Banquo, fail not our feast, make sure you finish your ride and you get back to my feast, because, you know, we really want you there. And everyone sort of leaves, and Macbeth is left on his own, he asks some messenger to go and get these men that are waiting for him, and we'll find out who those men are in a minute. And while he's waiting for them to come back, he has this he has another soliloquy where he talks about how he essentially gets a bit sorry for himself, and he starts having a bit of a whinge about the fact that, well, I'm now king and that's great, but I'm annoyed about that because I have no heir, and so actually I have a fruitless crown. I have a barren scepter that's been placed in my hand. And it does feel a little bit like, well, you're the one that chose to kill Duncan, you idiot. So why are you now feeling sorry for yourself about it? He even goes to a point where he's like, oh, Duncan's sleeping well now. He's not worrying about things like this, but I am. Oh, yeah, you're right. How horrible and rude of Duncan to go ahead and be murdered by you. But anyway, he's not feeling very good about his kingship because he's thinking, hang on a minute. I'm now going to hell. Like that's a definite, that's been decided, and there's no way around that, right? I know I've got to go to hell for what I've done. So that means I'm going to go die eventually, go to hell. And then if the prophecies turn out to be true, Banquo's kids are going to be the one to take my throne. So I've done all of this and sent myself to hell for Banquo's children. And he is not happy about that, even though in theory, Banquo's his best mate. You've got to remember at the time, this idea of, leaving behind your legacy and, having your throne sort of succeeded by your son. And he's annoyed because he hasn't got any kids. And he's like, well, now I am, it's a fruitless crown. I don't know why he's surprised by this, seeing as he very clearly knew this before, but anyway, it's upset him. He's not a happy bunny. So he decides that he needs to have Banquo killed. So when he's finished moaning about the fact that he doesn't have an heir and, how horrible Duncan is for being murdered and leaving him with all these problems, these two men come in and they're literally named murderers in the script. And we discover that they are murderers who it seems like Banquo played a role in sort of imprisoning. It was Banquo that maybe caught them. And Macbeth shows himself to be very, very manipulative, because what he does is he sort of says, well, Banquo's the one that put you where you are and you're in trouble because of it. And, are you really men if you don't do something about that? And it's interesting, isn't it? Because remember, that was the way Lady Macbeth sort of manipulated Macbeth to do her bidding. And now we can see that Macbeth is kind of using those tactics against other people too. So Lady Macbeth is like, not Lady Macbeth. Macbeth is like, yeah. So, he uses this metaphor of dogs, right? And he says, all the dogs there are loads of different dogs. They're all one breed, dog, but you've got, the mongrels, you've got the terriers, you've got the this, you've got that. And what he's essentially trying to do is suggest to these men, well, yeah, you're men, but what kind of men are you? Are you going to be the men that stand up and fight for what is right? Are you going to be the men that actually, stand up against the person that wronged you? And it gets its desired effect because they're sort of like, women, and, they say that they're going to make sure that they kill Banquo as a result. So Macbeth's kind of got his way, and obviously because of his sneaky little questions, which we now realise he was asking for this reason, he can tell them where Banquo and his son Fleance are going to be later on. And he's like, you need to go and kill them, okay? I have no idea if this is working or not, but I'm kind of liking it. So he sends them off. Off they go. And then we pretty much move on to Act 3, Scene 2. Now we see Lady Macbeth again here. And again, she's on her own. She is having another little moment of introspection where you do see a different side to her than when Macbeth is there with her, when she seems to feel like she needs to be a lot stronger, a lot more dominant. When she's on her own, those insecurities seem to shine through a little bit, okay? And they do shine through, and she sort of seems a little bit uneasy about things. But in comes Macbeth, and she immediately sort of seems to man up, for want of a better term. And he talks about how his mind feels full of scorpions, okay? And, it worries him that Banquo's still alive, and he's not happy about that, and he's worried about this, that, and the other. And she sort of is doing her usual sort of dismissive stuff. She sort of says things like, well, you know, what's done is done. And, you know, you there's not a lot of point in thinking about it now. Things without remedy, you should give no regard to. You know, you shouldn't think about these things that you can't fix. You've made your choices now. You've done it. You made your bed, now lie in it, mate. You know, we've got what we wanted, and we need to accept that and sort of, you know, try not to worry about the things we don't have control over. And that's lovely advice, and that's great. But Macbeth then does this very strange thing where he sort of goes, oh yeah, but you know, I've got this really dark, dastardly plan for, you know, and something bad's going to happen later, and you know, it's really, you know, something really bad, and it involves Banquo. And so Lady Macbeth quite understandably goes, well, what's that then? He goes, oh, don't worry, no, don't think about it, I can't tell you. And it's always a really strange moment, because like, why bring it up then? So he essentially doesn't tell her that he's planning to have Banquo killed. Instead, he says, oh, when Banquo's there tonight, could you really make a fuss of him, really make him feel welcome? And I've looked into this loads. I can't work it out why he tells her that, apart from to sort of almost give her like plausible deniability. So she really didn't know it was going to happen. Is he trying to protect his wife by making sure she didn't know about it in advance? I truly don't know. I can only sort of speculate. But he tells her that she must be innocent of the knowledge. Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck. So he talks to her in a sort of quite an endearing way. You know, she's his lady love, and he wants to potentially protect her from the next murder that he's planning. So we know what's coming. Lady Macbeth doesn't, but she sort of gets a sense of something not looking good. And at that point, we see a role reversal starting to shift ultimately, don't we? Because Lady Macbeth is now being left out a little bit in the cold. She's his partner in greatness, lovely. But with that now seems to be coming a little bit of, you know, whereas before it was leave it all to me, leave the rest to me, I'm going to sort this stuff out, you leave it in my dispatch. Now he's telling her to be innocent of the knowledge, and he's telling her to sort of not worry too much about things, and he doesn't want her to know everything. So you can almost see that very slow movement from Lady Macbeth having all the power and telling him what to do, and now Macbeth starting to take over that sort of role. Now, I've lost something that I needed. There it is. So we see that there's going to be this feast tonight, and we know that they need to kind of be ready for that and be looking welcoming and not worrying about anything, pretending everything's absolutely fine. And we know that obviously Fleance and Banquo are in a lot of danger. So at this point, we actually go in the next scene to the murder. It's a very short scene, one of the shortest in the whole play, I think. And in this scene, essentially, we see them riding, and we see the murderers turn up. The murderers turn up, and Banquo shows himself, I suppose, to be the good guy all the way till his final moments, because even when he is sort of attacked, he tells his son, like, run, go. And Fleance actually gets away. So Banquo is killed, but Fleance escapes. And as a result of this, obviously, in theory, that prophecy the witches gave about Banquo's children could be king, well, that could still potentially happen then, couldn't it? Because they survive, or he survives. So Banquo is dead, and that's the end of that scene pretty much. And now we go to the feast, and this is, you know, quite a famous scene due to the fact that we have the ghost, Banquo's ghost turns up and all of that. I think this scene, I've thought this loads of times, I always feel like this scene could be performed in an almost comical way if you wanted it to be. I've seen it performed in loads of different ways. It just completely depends on your interpretation of it. But what's great is the entrances and exits. The form of this being a play works so well in this, because the way Banquo's ghost comes and goes, in the way it messes with Macbeth's mind, and the fact that the audience can see the damage it's causing for Macbeth's reputation, and people whispering about, you know, people are going to start talking after this, all right, in the world of the play, because they're having this feast and everyone comes in. It's all very grand. Macbeth is acting like, you know, big man. He's the king now. And he's loving it. And he's talking to everybody. And they all sort of sit down. And what the stage directions say is that at some point, while Macbeth's still sort of talking to everyone and being very, you know, like the noble host, while he's doing that, the ghost of Banquo, all covered in blood, sort of sneaks in all creepy and sits in Macbeth's chair. Now, because it doesn't seem that anyone else can see him, and Macbeth, it seems, doesn't really notice. He just sees that all of the table, or like all the chairs on the table are full, like everyone's sat down. And so one of the men says to him, like, "Good Lord, sit down." He's like, "Well, I can't. I have no chair." And they're like, "Well, yes, you do. There's an empty chair for you here." And that's when he seems to clock that Banquo's ghost is sat in his chair. He just potentially just looked over and thought it was just someone else. And he goes nuts. Obviously, he freaks out, sees him, and he's like, "You know, don't never shake your gory locks at me," meaning like his hair's all bloody, and he's looking at him, and he loses it. And Lady Macbeth, bless her, steps in, as she does, and sort of goes, "It's all right, everyone, like, it's all cool, don't worry." He gets like this. It's not a problem. Sometimes he's prone to these, but the worst thing we can do is kind of make a fuss of it. We need to make sure that we're not giving that, you know, attention. He'd be devastated if he felt like you were all watching him while he was freaking out. So everyone sort of goes, "All right then," and kind of goes back to normal. And Macbeth comes out of it because Banquo's ghost disappears. Banquo's ghost goes away. So Banquo's ghost goes away, and Macbeth sort of goes, "Oh, sorry everyone, like, ridiculous, I'm fine. Don't know what that was all about. I will be fine in a minute." And then there's a couple of sort of instances where he's basically Banquo's ghost comes and goes and starts messing with him a little bit. And every time he freaks out again. And obviously this gets to a point where I think eventually Lady Macbeth's like, "Right, everyone just needs to go, because clearly, you know, he's not well." And you can see how annoyed she is with him. And she's like, "Are you a man? What are you doing? Like, why are you acting like this?" And he's like, "I am a man, but you know, what I've just seen, no one would be able to handle. It's too much, too terrifying. Why does he have to look like that? Why does he have to be covered in blood?" Oh, and actually, terrible teacher of me, I forgot, just before the feast sort of fully begins, so everyone's come in, but the feast hasn't begun. He hasn't started speaking to everyone yet or anything. The murderers turn up, and I always find that an odd touch as well, because the suggestion is that they're just in the corner of the room talking to him, and they're all covered in blood about this murder they've just committed. And Macbeth's like, "Okay, so what happened?" And they're like, yeah, like, all's good. Slight problem. We didn't actually kill Fleance. And Macbeth sort of is like, "Okay, well, I was starting to relax because I know Banquo's dead. But now I'm a bit worried because Fleance isn't." And obviously he uses this metaphor of, okay, the worm that's fled hath nature, will venom breed. Meaning, okay, he's just a worm at the moment. Yeah, he's just little. He's not the snake that he describes Banquo as earlier. But in time, that could be a problem for us. In time, he's going to come back and he's going to have bred venom. He's going to have built up anger. And also, remember the time this is being written, you're looking at a time when, you know, getting vengeance for the death of your father, not even a question. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't even think about it. That's happening. So he kind of knows at that point that at some point he'll have to deal with the Fleance problem. But he also says a really nasty thing, which it's weird because you saw how guilty he felt about killing Duncan. You saw that. And it wasn't long ago. And he suddenly seems to have switched to this sort of really horrible bloke because the men are covered in blood. And he basically says something along the lines of, "Well, it's better on you than in him." Which, okay, fair enough, you felt like you had to kill Banquo, but that's just mean. That's just horrible. So there are moments when I feel like he really does show himself to... I almost wonder if Shakespeare hasn't created a particularly believable character there, because it's so different from the Macbeth we saw sort of, you know, a couple of scenes ago when he was really, really guilty and struggling because of what he'd done. So anyway, that's just my thought. So moving forward then, he, like I say, before he sees Banquo's ghost, before the banquet gets ruined, all of that stuff, he does speak to the murderers and find out that Fleance actually got away, even though Banquo is dead. So that will become, well, as I said, it could potentially be big for him, couldn't it? Because that could mean that the witch's prophecies could still come true. We'll see. Actually, I say that we don't see in this play, but potentially in future Macbeth's land, it might happen. So we have seen Banquo's ghost, we've seen Macbeth freak out, and now he's left alone with his wife because his wife basically sent everybody home because her husband was acting like a lunatic. And she's not very happy with him. And he's basically like, look, I can't. He basically sort of says, like, blood will have blood, okay? What I've done, it isn't the end of it, okay? This is just going to keep happening. I'm going to have to constantly fight for my position. This isn't going to be all right, you know. He's not happy. He's worried. He's worried about what's going to happen next. And he also talks about the fact that he sort of says, he describes it as almost being like, okay, I've stepped into the blood so far now that to turn around and go back will be the same as to continue. As in, like, I can't go back now because it's such a mess, and it's sort of, I've killed too much and done too many things now that this isn't going to get better, regardless of what I do. Like, I might as well just keep killing. Yeah, I might as well just keep doing this because it's just going to be horrible otherwise. It's horrible either way. So he decides to go back and see the witches because he feels like they can maybe give him some answers to, you know, the questions he's got and the worries he's got. He wants essentially a little bit of reassurance. But you've got to think, okay, the first time the witches turned up to him, they appeared to him. He didn't ask for them, give him his dues. This time, he is actively wanting to go and seek them out. And that shows, again, a massive change in his character, doesn't it? Because he's now actively looking for guidance from the wrong places. He's wanting guidance from evil. He's wanting to go to the witches and be told essentially things that are going to make him feel better. And he chooses that he decides he's going to go back to the witches the next day or whenever and go and get some guidance on what to do. So he decides to do that. And we sort of finish the scene there pretty much. Now, at this point, we meet a new character. Now, she's only in this play, I think, once or twice max. And she is Hecate, okay? It looks like Hecate. I have looked into this. I'm reasonably sure we're going to stick with Hecate, sorry. But, again, it's one of those words. It doesn't really matter as long as you know how to spell it. And sometimes Hecate is easy. Like, if you're thinking phonetically, it looks like Hecate, not Hecate. Anyway, she's the goddess of witchcraft, right? And we discover at this point that the witches we met at the beginning, they were being a little bit naughty and she's not happy with them, all right? She's really annoyed because she says to them, what were you doing? Why were you messing around with Banquo and Macbeth without telling me? Like, what was that all about? Like, you didn't inform me you were going to do that. Why were you creating mischief without telling me about it? And she sort of tells them off a little bit. And she's like, from now on, I want to be kept in the loop about what's going on with that guy. I want to know what's going on. I want to be involved. And she basically gives them instructions for when he comes again. So again, this supernatural knowledge. She knows he's coming back, even though he hasn't done it yet. And she says, next time we are going to lead him. Essentially, she says, we're going to lead him to his destruction. We are going to get him feeling so secure in his power, in his position on the throne and everything else, that he is going to essentially lead himself to his death and to his downfall because he's going to be too cocky. Yeah, I always use the analogy with my students of you're more likely to crash statistically within a mile of your house if you're driving, because at that point you relax a bit because you feel like you really know where you are, you know the roads, you know what to expect. And actually, if you let your guard down, that's when you're more likely to have an accident. So I always think that kind of ties quite well in with what Hecate's saying here. She's saying, look, let's get him feeling like nothing can hurt him, nothing can get to him. And then actually that might be the time that he will be with his guard down and we can get him. We can properly get him then. So they are told that he will be coming to see them and they need to tell him things that are going to lead him into this false sense of security, essentially. And we'll see that when we go to Act 4 at a later date. But that's all planned, all right? So we get on to our final act, our final scene of this act at this point, and we meet Lennox again, who's, as I've said before, he's just like one of the dudes that hang around with like all the nobles and Macbeth, and I think he was there when Duncan was found dead. Lennox, all right, and he is talking to another lord, another nobleman, and it's not really important who. I don't even think he's actually named. I think he is literally just a lord, and they are now. This is another sort of contextual thing that I think might be worth bringing up. What I like to think about here, okay, because yes, this isn't completely true. It is based on a true story, and there really was a Macbeth and a Duncan and a Banquo in real life in Scotland in sort of not ancient history, but in history. But it is based on truth. And so what we have to remember is essentially, by the sounds of it, Macbeth is becoming a tyrant, a dictator, if you will. And I don't feel like that's made enough fuss of in the play for students, especially, to really grasp it. But Scotland itself becomes a really awful place to live. If you actually read between the lines a little bit and pick up on the little nuances said here and there across the play, people are scared, all right? There are foul whisperings abroad. People are not sure who to trust. People feel like anyone could turn on them. And Macbeth, it's a reign of terror that he essentially sort of grows over time. By the time he reaches his end, people despise him. People are terrified of him because he is just so sort of bloodthirsty, and essentially he seems to be evil by the end of this play. So this part of the play I think is interesting because they're talking about what's been going on. It's like a previously in Macbeth moment, but they're not being that forthcoming over what is really going on. They do call Macbeth a tyrant, which I think is interesting because before we've got to think about this change in fortune, going back to tragic hero, I suppose. He's gone from brave Macbeth, noble Macbeth, valiant, blah de blah, to they stop naming him eventually. By Act 4, Macduff and Malcolm won't say his name. They say that his sole name blisters their tongues. They won't talk about him. Well, they talk about him, but they won't refer to him by name. So, you're looking at this sort of absolute hatred and fear, and that's infectious and that spreads. And so Scotland itself feels like a very unsafe place to be. People don't know what they can and can't say. They don't know who might be listening. They don't know who might report things. And it's scary. And and you can see this by the very careful way Lennox and this lord are talking to each other. They're saying what they mean, but they're veiling it. They're being very careful in the way they say it. And they essentially talk about the fact that Macduff has now gone to England, and that Donalbain and Malcolm have fled and switched ways, and Macduff has gone to meet Macduff has gone to meet Malcolm in England. So we learn that obviously what we were talking about before with a couple of scenes ago with Macduff not wanting to go to the coronation and things like that, he has now obviously taken it one step further and gone, nah, like I'm going to go to Malcolm. And we discover very shortly that he's gone to England in order to help bring back an army that the English king gives them. So we, by this point in the play, see that things don't go well for Macbeth pretty much from the minute he takes on the kingship. And he doesn't have a minute to, not that I'm feeling sorry for him at all, but he doesn't sort of enjoy it one bit. And he sort of says, well, no, I think Lady Macbeth says it. She says, naught's had and all's spent if we sort of have all of these things, but without content. So, what's the point in all this? And again, does this come back to the cautionary tale stuff? Does this come back to the idea of, well, you do bad things, and don't expect to enjoy them. Don't expect to get pleasure from them, because you're going to be punished for them. Scotland itself is going to be punished for it, let alone the people that are, responsible for it. So I think altogether, when we get to this point in the play, you are being very much made aware of the ramifications of doing something so evil, so sinful, so cruel, and Shakespeare is doing his utmost to kind of flatter King James and, you know, warn the public, look, I know you don't like him, I know you're not sure about him, but, you know, if you try mucking about with him, you try messing around with that chain of being, things don't go well. Macbeth's not happy, is he? Lady Macbeth's not happy. They're panicky, they're worried, they're relying on witches, and it doesn't end well. So things are getting dark, okay? Things are getting really dark. Scotland, Macbeth. Banquo's dead, which is even worse because he was one of the real good guys. And we now know that Malcolm and Macduff are in England, and all they want to do is bring about the downfall of this tyrant, of this man that's, you know, created so much pain and so much misery. So I think that pretty much finishes off Act 3. And the makeup's done. I don't know if I like it or not. I mean, first attempt at doing anything a little bit mad, and I don't know. I think it's okay. Anyway, Act 4 next. It's 3 scenes, Act 4, but really long scenes. And then when we get to Act 5, it's, I think, 9 scenes, but they're all really short. So we'll talk about structure a little bit more in the next video. And hopefully that's helped you with the next act. And I will see you soon.